We have Mike Murrell back on the Battlefit podcast, and this time we're discussing specifically about the UFC. And since Mike Murrell is a BJJ and judo black belt himself, we are going to be pretty much technical about where BJJ and judo and the grappling arts stand today in the field of MMA, most notably so in the UFC. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the podcast.
Good to see you again, Pushkaraj. Good to be back on the show.
Thank you. Same here. Same here. Looking forward to your workshop in Delhi. That's coming up soon.
Yeah, I'll be coming in next week. I'm gonna do my best on the MMA front. I've been distracted lately, but I got a chance to take a look at some of the recent fights and things that you mentioned. So hopefully I have some insights for you.
Uh-huh. So, what's your take with the way the grappling arts are evolving today in the UFC? Obviously, we've come a long way since having only BJJ was like a major advantage. You had the Gracies dominating it for a while. You had top level grapplers coming in and absolutely dominating the sport completely. But that trend has changed, and it has changed and how. So, what's your take on how it's evolving right now?
Well, I think the major thing that we're seeing is that MMA grappling is now its own thing. It's not just high-level wrestlers or high-level judoka or high-level jiu-jitsu people coming in, but now we're actually seeing that MMA grappling has turned into its own art form, and there are vast differences between that and what's effective in, say, like sport jiu-jitsu.
And what would you say that those differences are?
Um, well, I think we had some specific fights and things like that that you wanted to talk about, which are really good examples of these. Um, but in general, jiu-jitsu, um, at the lower levels, it's very dynamic. Like to get a submission, usually at the lower levels, like white through brown belt, you have to be very dynamic to submit your opponent because there's a lot of mistakes being made. A lot of people reach out at the wrong direction or they struggle in the wrong way. They expose themselves to certain submissions and things like that. So, in order to be a submission artist, a lot of times the best submission artists aren't necessarily the best at controlling their opponent and holding them in positions. They're the best at like finding transitions and finding openings to shoot a dynamic submission hold in at that time. Um, MMA, the dynamic thing is getting your face pounded in, right?
Yeah.
So in any position where it's like, hey, I'm in full mount or I'm in three-quarter mount or half guard or something like that, you are worried about the submission, but the other thing you have to worry about is, the elbow dropping on your face, getting punched, all of that. So we're seeing a big, I don't want to give away too much before we start talking about the fighters, but we are seeing some big trends that are towards sort of static grappling, like the ability to control somebody, put the fire out, not allow them to make dynamic movements, and then obviously the threat of striking can lead to a lot of submissions.
Yeah, setting up the submissions by softening the opponent with strikes is what has now become the trend. Like even top grapplers are actually first smashing their opponent and then sinking in a submission and getting it. Whereas earlier it was pretty much easy to see people just yank out submissions from almost any position. But now everybody is almost a little bit aware of how to avoid and get out or at least stall out in those positions. Uh, and if people are coming with good grappling, but an incapacity to deal with striking, like we had the Bryce Mitchell KO. That was bad. One punch knockout. So, and that's not the
By the
only
way,
thing.
by the way, I was not imitating Bryce Mitchell right there. I was imitating what I would look like if somebody was throwing a whole bunch of punches at me while I was trying to grapple them. Bryce is amazing, but yeah,
Yeah. So, what do you think? Like, if somebody goes in to MMA today with a very good grappling background, what should they be looking at working into their game?
I would say that the fundamentals of, I mean, let's be honest, Dagestani wrestling, like that style of wrestling has really changed the sport entirely. And we bear witness to that with a lot of fights. But the big thing about it is, like I said, not looking for super dynamic transitions necessarily. Those things can save your ass in a fight. Like they can really get you out of a bad spot, and sometimes you can catch somebody. So let me illustrate this with an example. Like you asked me a little bit about Charles Oliveira, and obviously one of the most dynamic and dominant submission artists in the history of the UFC. Just amazing. But when you watch his fight with Islam Makachev, it doesn't look like a dynamic fight at all, right? It looks like one guy is going to come at you with a whole bunch of dynamic stuff, and the other guy just kind of like, you see a fire and someone just throws a blanket over it.
Stuff it
And
out.
yeah, so it's negating your partner's ability to be dynamic. You just kind of control and squeeze and hold. And that whole idea, limiting your partner's ability to scramble, to get back to their feet, to escape, because I mean, we've all seen this in lower level grappling tournaments too, where somebody will be really like kicking the other person's ass. They're on top of them. They're about to get the submission, you think, and then they take a big risk. They throw a triangle from the top position or something without a lot of control, and then they end up on the bottom and they end up losing the fight on points or something like that, right? And that's something I doubt you would ever see Islam Makhachev do. That's something he would. I'm going to keep this half guard. I'm going to squeeze you to death. Then I'm going to pass him out. Then I'm going to hold you there. I'm going to make you suffer for 5 minutes. And then eventually you're going to give me your neck because you're so tired of just being squeezed to death, right? And that's the style of grappling I think that is more important. Watching someone like Khabib or Islam, what you notice about them is they have gas tanks that are insane. I'm friends with one of their strength and conditioning guys, Dima, out here, and he told me some of the stuff they do for strength and conditioning, and just the hill sprints alone will make you. I would have had a heart attack, right? I tried to do some of the workout, and I'm like, this is not okay. So they get the chance because their gas tank is so developed to do these big dynamic slams and takedowns. But in general, it doesn't really take that much out of you to get slammed. I mean, obviously, if you land on your head and if it happens over and over again and your gas tank sucks, it's bad. But I can actually waste a lot of energy picking you up to do a big slam and get almost no result out of it. And then I'll be more tired than you are. And you just took like an ukemi, you fell, and you're like, cool. You just burned out your gas tank trying to slam me down and do this big dynamic throw. When if you watch, say, that Islam versus Olivera fight, it didn't need to be, obviously, it was like a rock, right? But at the same time, even just the easiest, tiniest little takedown, it could be a single leg, it could be a body lock, a little itty bitty trip that cost almost no energy. But if Islam gets on top of you after that little thing,
Control you.
you got nowhere to go. You're those flames trying to kick out from that wet blanket, and you're done, right? So I would say that if you watch the earlier UFCs, wrestlers started to dominate because they had really just a much higher level of wrestling, and they're shooting a lot, they're doing those sort of things, and people just couldn't deal with it. Nowadays, people all know how to deal with it, the sprawl and brawl idea, right? So if you can just find ways to get to your partner's leg and then climb up into a body lock and then take your time and wear them out, and that's a much better strategy in the long run. I think actually before his shoulder popped out, if you watch the Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez, the first one, there was a really good transition that Brian hit in the first round. It didn't amount to much, but he got some control from it. And that was just, he kind of changed levels and he shot for a single leg. And then the second that Yair started like dealing with the single leg like a traditional wrestler, like I'm going to sprawl, I'm going to whizzer. He climbed right up into a body lock and he was able to hold him there and throw knees and things like that for a long time. So like having more control over your partner's body, it's not just about getting them to the floor. It's about negating their ability to stand back up. Because if you take them down and they get back up, probably cost you more energy to try to hold them down than it did for them to get back up.
Yep.
So
And
there's a lot of stuff.
yeah, so from a point that you brought up, like collegiate wrestling and the traditional form of wrestling, which initially was majorly dominant, now you see is not that dominant, whereas Greco-Roman and a bit of Nogi Judo is playing a huge role in the recent times. If you see the way Merab dominated Henry Cejudo, literally judo trips all the way. Whereas Henry Cejudo was dependent on shooting single legs, double legs, and Merab never gave it to him. So how do you see that playing into the system now?
Well, I mean, Nogi Judo techniques, which I know a lot of wrestlers probably get upset when you hear that because they do the same moves, right? I actually, this Friday, I have Justin Flores, who is an Olympian and a Division I wrestler, and I think probably the most brilliant mind in like assessing takedowns for jiu-jitsu, MMA, all that stuff. He was Ronda Rousey's coach, all those people. He's coming in for a seminar on Friday at my gym, and just watching some of his material and things, the flow between them, you can, when I started I was in judo. I got my black belt, and then I came to no-gi jiu-jitsu, and I tried to use my judo. Did not work too well. You don't know how to grip, you don't know how to hold, you don't know all this sort of stuff. It's just a very different sport. But if you watch, say, like counters to a rear body lock or something like that, that's where these sort of things come up. Body locks, like I was just explaining, is like a better form of taking it down. That also leaves you open to whizzers, which leaves you open to like haraigoshis and osotogaris and all these judo techniques that are really great counters that aren't generally used as much in wrestling. Um, I don't know enough about Henry Cejudo's career, but I know that he's a very good like swing single. Like his swing single is top tier, one of the best ever, right? And that's not really as easy to take someone down with an MMA because of the fact that like, hey, you're only grabbing the leg. Now the guy's sliding out of it and he's moving, right? So as you climb up the body, then you walk yourself right into judo throws and things, which are a little bit less common. So I think you're just seeing the MMA grappling is evolving quite a bit. You know, Henry Cejudo is one of the top tier, best ever guys when it comes to collegiate and Olympic style wrestling and everything. But he's playing in a different sport now. You know, John Danaher always said that like there's different skills in MMA that are completely different, like shoot boxing, the idea of using your strikes to set up your takedowns, something George St. Pierre was amazing at, right?
Yep.
So that becomes, you know, a better wrestler may lose to somebody who's just better at shoot boxing over and over and over again.
Yep. So, since you are pretty much an expert at heel hooks, it's been a long time we've really seen like high level heel hooks actually bear fruit in the UFC. In other promotions, they have still been able to pull it off. But in UFC, sort of everybody knows the heel hook game by now. And of recent times, a very interesting scramble that occurred with heel hooks was between Alexander Pantoja and Royval, where they went into a heel hook battle that literally went into rolls, inside heel hook, outside heel hook, back 50-50, and then scrambled out. It was pretty interesting that at one point in time, people didn't know how to escape a heel hook, and now people are scrambling through them and like multiple reversals on the same. So, where do you see heel hooks place in the entire MMA category now, as of today?
Hmm. Um, so I guess it's really nuanced. It depends on the level of the people who are fighting. So you'll see people who are extraordinarily good with heel hooks, fighting people with a big skill discrepancy. And in that case, the heel hooks are just perfect. They're amazing. You finish people like that, it's over. You watch a lot of Ryan Hall's fights, Gary Tonon's fights, and yeah, they come at it and they kill the guy with the heel hook immediately. But I think that as people become more aware of them, um, obviously people are seeing them. And, you know, if you're a guy who finished the last three guys by heel hook, I mean, if you got a decent coach, like the whole time you're going to be looking for counters and ways to finish that, which we saw with like Ton Lee, which of course Ton Lee is, you know, training with Ryan Hall all the time. So like when he and Gary Tonon fought and Gary dropped in for the heel hook, he perfect counter and knocked Gary out. And you just see that anticipation, right? Back in the day, don't do leg locks in MMA because you're going to get hit. People will hit you if you do leg locks in MMA. Turns out, you know, people were catching heel hooks back in the day, but it was mostly because the people they were fighting had no idea what was going on, and they were just you're fighting somebody who's ostensibly a white belt in heel hooks, and you're catching people a lot. But the level of leg lock entanglements and like the way that it's used in the game has changed so dramatically that and it's evolved so much that nowadays, you know, you can absolutely use heel hooks against these people at high levels. That said, I think that something that Faraz Sahabi said once, I was taking a class with him at TriStar, and he was saying that heel hooks are great. Like they're great. You can use them in MMA for sure. But the better thing that you should be thinking about, right, when it comes to MMA in general, be on top. You don't want to be on bottom. You want to be on top when you're in MMA because of obviously the threat of striking along with your grappling. So we actually saw in the Pantoja fight, I think it was in like the last round, he had the back, he lost the back. Now he's on bottom and he's starting to get ground and pounded. And he had like a really dynamic, just whipping his leg over. It was like rubber guard, except for he didn't even use his hand. He just like whipped it over like BJ Penn style. And he managed to use it like an outside heel hook attempt as a way to kind of shield himself and keep him from getting ground and pounded. But The real secondary use, and I might even say primary use, because I don't want to get my head beaten in. Like if I'm in an MMA fight, I'm thinking two things when it comes to heel hooks. I'm thinking I'm going to attempt this outside heel hook in particular. The outside heel hook is a great way to do this. You reap for the outside heel hook. When your partner goes to roll out, you forget about the heel hook and just make sure you end up on top. So you've got an instant sweep, and a sweep in jiu-jitsu is 2 points, but in MMA it could be 20 elbows to the guy's head. You know what I'm saying? Like you should definitely take that advantage to just get back on top. The other thing that I noticed is that, and I'm not criticizing anybody's technique here because these guys are world class and they're amazing. And they're half my size and they kick my ass. But something that Darren Yanagiyama actually, we were talking outside of Bellator. I was coaching Abraham Baisao at Bellator, and we were outside of weigh-ins, and he was talking about heel hooks. And when it comes to finishing a heel hook in MMA, your big problem is that you have this slippery glove. And the glove right here, this is where I'm typically going to be trying to catch your heel on the heel hook. You'll see all these mistakes where people are using their elbow as all soft, fleshy, material here that like slips and slides, especially when you guys are slippery and you got Vaseline and all that sort of stuff from your eyes and stuff. So like you definitely are not finishing heel hooks in high level jiu-jitsu competition with your elbow generally. And in MMA, it's even worse because you're real slippery, right? So because this area, this hard fulcrum right here is what you need to actually catch the heel and get good leverage, using your hand to cup the heel and then using either your wrist or your forearm or your elbow to help, create the torque is a much better way of actually finishing that heel hook, which I don't see a lot of people using. A lot of folks who are not catching heels that way, and it shows because you catch on the elbow every single time, you're going to lose it, right?
Yeah, Mikey cupped the heel. Mikey Musumeci cupped the heel. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he shoves it up by his ear and stuff like that too.
Cups it completely and then yanks it.
Yeah, at the beginning it's like you have to do everything. Here's exactly how you do it. Put your hand here, all that sort of stuff. And then once you understand the principles, then you're like, all right, I'll use my ear for the same thing, right?
Absolutely. Whatever works to get that grip. Once you understand leverage, it's easy to pull it off. Relatively easy. Okay. So then the next thing I wanted to discuss was obviously coming to the funny part. If you saw the Dustin Poirier fight recently, he kept jumping guillotines.
Okay, so I have not seen the fight. I got to see the press conference of him talking about it afterwards, and I completely I have a lot of experience with this because I used to do this a lot when I was like coming up the ranks in jiu-jitsu too. But yeah, anything specific about the fight? Just the guillotines are hilarious.
Yeah, so I had bet on Dustin winning it, despite BSD being the top favorite to win it, because I knew Dustin has a background in high level jiu-jitsu, despite being like an amazing striker. I knew BSD would come in with power wrestling, and the best counter to power wrestling is good BJJ. And every time BSD shot a double leg, Dustin just jumped the guillotine, tried to finish it, eventually could not finish it, but then took the positional advantage, turned around, and got back to brawling, and that's how he eventually knocked him out.
Yeah,
but it's quite funny.
If the threat itself is there, is dangerous enough, then it does change the way that the person has to wrestle you. That dropping for guillotines, and I'll get on my like white belt and blue belt students and stuff like this a lot. But once you hit like purple belt, I'm like, dude, do whatever you want, right? Because dropping for a guillotine comes from like two places. It comes from extreme confidence or absolute desperation. You're either like, I have no way to beat this guy, or whatever, man. If he takes me down, I'm going to get on. I'm going to finish this. And if I don't, I'm still going to find a way out. Right. And it seems like that's where Dustin was coming from. His corner's like, don't do the guillotines. He's like, I'm doing the fucking guillotines, dude.
Yeah. First thing back into the round, guillotine. Boom.
Why not? Yeah. I mean, it is a bad idea on paper, right? Mm-hmm. That said, he finishes it. You all go, he's the hero. Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
This goes back to that same thing I was talking about before about static versus dynamic, right? The static way to deal with somebody shooting a double leg, if you want the threat of a front headlock, is sprawl, down block, shoot underhooks, control the top position, make sure that your wrist gets all the way up.
Good.
And you're like, this is perfect. I have a rule with guillotines. I don't drop back for a guillotine unless I'm like, wow, my whole hand is all the way up above his shoulder line. If I can see this, then I'll go for it. But if I get in here and it's just like a couple fingers, I'm like, okay, that was a nice attempt. I made him think about it. Let me do something else. Let me move, shuffle. Ah, it got all the way in. Now I'm going to drop back for it, right? But the dynamic version is just, hey, man, I'm going for it. I'm going to try and get this. This would be why I think that if you have so let's go back real quick to the Islam versus Olivera, right? You go back to that fight, and in order to beat somebody who's so good at the static grappling game, like a Khabib or an Islam, if you're going to beat them at the static grappling game, you have to be better than them at that game, and you're fucking not. Right? You are
Obviously.
not better than them at that game most of the time. There may be somebody out there, but nobody has shown the ability to yet, right? So the guy who can possibly beat guys like that, if it's strict grappling like that, is going to be somebody who is very dynamic. So I think that if you run Oliveira versus Islam 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, I think Oliveira wins that fight sometimes. But I think it's like if you do it 30 times, he wins like 4 times or 3 times with something super sick, right? It's probably a left-sided high elbow guillotine or something that came out of nowhere. It's something like that. But it's not, oh, Oliveira he worked on his wrestling. So now he took him down and he took his back and he's holding him. It's like, it's not happening. The skill differential is too big there, right? So I think that, good on Dustin for putting the threat out there and being confident and getting all that stuff done. So, I mean, it was obviously I got to watch the whole fight, but I think he did a really good job of obviously getting back up and using that threat to actually save himself a little bit.
Um, so we've seen BJJ even now be very effective in amateur, semi-pro, and even in the sort of B-level leagues of international MMA. Like pure BJJ artists are still cutting it there. They're still managing to get amazing submissions, balancing it out with striking. But in the UFC, you 7 out of the 10 top ranked guys in almost every division are either a brown belt or a black belt in BJJ who still prioritize the striking. Best example being Sean Strickland, who's a black belt but rarely uses his BJJ. People just know him as a boxer, right? You have Johnny Walker, who is a brown belt but barely ever uses his jiu-jitsu game. Purely depends on his striking and kicks. So, how do you see this trend developing? And is it an era for strikers now as compared to grappling, or how does it balance out?
It's really not that old debate is, I think, bunk. Striking versus grappling, all that sort of stuff. It's really the interplay between the two. What I see with that is just that they're MMA fighters. They're not jiu-jitsu players, right? So like Sean Strickland's a black belt, right? You put Sean Strickland at Worlds in jiu-jitsu, if you put him at ADCC, Sean Strickland's going to get the floor mopped with him over and over again. And he's probably going to say some funny shit afterwards, and it's going to be great. Like Mo, if you're listening, put Sean Strickland in ADCC. It'd be hilarious, right? He's definitely going to lose, but he's going to be goddamn hilarious. But it really just boils down to the difference between high level grappling and the difference between your MMA, right? We talked about it before. Strikes are a big factor. It's also easier to maybe submit a guy or to beat a guy if you can punch his head off a few times first, right? I know that the old adage, you punch me, I turn into a brown belt. It's not necessarily true, but you punch me, I might be a little stupid for a while, and or I might just be afraid of you punching me, and then yeah, it's gonna be much easier for you to finish me, right? So it used to be, because everyone had really bad low level jujitsu, oh, this guy's a purple belt. And then he goes in and, oh, he's going to be dynamic. He's catching this. It's all dynamic stuff, right? You better not go to the ground with him because you're stupid. And if you step up your leg, he's going to knee bar you. And you should have been able to stop it because it's really easy to stop, but you don't know what you're doing. And this guy's better than you. But the game is not that anymore. So if you look at one of my old coaches, Jake Shields, if you watch him compete in jiu-jitsu back in the day and stuff, it wasn't really like, oh man, I want to do jiu-jitsu like Jake, where you're like, oh, look at that spinning upside down guard triangle he shot on the guy. It was nothing like that, right? But if you roll with him in the room, you go, wow, I can't do anything right now, and I'm squashed, and he's training in a t-shirt, so it's waterboarding me, and I can't move, and every time I try to hip escape, he cranks my neck to the side, and it's that wet blanket thing I was talking about, right? Where it's like, man, this is not the most dynamic jujitsu you've ever seen. It's static. It's Islam Makachev. It's Khabib. It's like, dude, use this. I mean, what we really saw with them was with Islam and Khabib was they learned how to be very static with their grappling and like just give you a hope. Like all of the leg riding, all of the body locking from the ground, all of the inside wrist control, killing your wrist and bringing you down, the Dagestani handcuffs, that kind of stuff. The great thing about that style of grappling for MMA is two things. You can still strike while negating their ability to get up. You put somebody in the Dagestani handcuffs and now he's stuck on all of his weights on an arm. He can't get up. Now you're beating him. You're ground and pounding him. Like you're taking shots at him and he can't really find a way to escape. On top of that, rather than like a full mount, if I go to full mount on top of you, you can bridge. You can hip escape. You can turn and give your back and then try to roll out of it. You can do all sorts of things like that. When I put you in an intermediary position, like a 3/4 mount with a body lock or something like that, you can't bridge. You can't stand up. But because you're not in this psychological trap of, oh, he doesn't have me in mount yet, or he doesn't have my back yet, so I can still fight out of here. I should fight and make sure he doesn't take mount or doesn't take my back. The problem is when you're in that psychological hole, you're willing to waste energy in a position where you can't actually get up. So now you're getting more and more exhausted. I'm sitting on kind of like a midline. In jiu-jitsu, traditionally, I want my 4 points. So I need to take hooks on your back, or I need to get to the mount on top of you or whatever like that. But it's actually kind of easier to escape those positions in some of these intermediary, like folk style wrestling traps that you see in those positions, right? So I think that jiu-jitsu is extraordinarily useful for MMA, and if you don't have it, you're going to get your ass kicked. Like you're going to get eaten up. Your legs are going to get torn up. Your arms are going to get torn up. But ultimately, it's like saying when people say like a high-level boxer would come into MMA and he would just destroy because his hands are really good. And you're like, no, because he doesn't know how to shoot box. And maybe he even wrestled all the way up to college, and he's one of the best professional boxers in the world. Does he have like the makings of somebody who'd be fantastic at MMA? Yeah. But he's not. He's not top level MMA yet. Like he doesn't know how to shoot box. We see Bo Nickel right now. Bo Nickel looks amazing, right? And it's not because his wrestling is the best ever. It's fucking astonishingly good, but it's because he's knocking people out, dude. Like he throws that shot down to your leg, you go, oh God, I don't want to be on the bottom of this guy. He's gonna arm triangle me and he's gonna squash me and he's gonna beat me up. And then he hits you with a straight left or an overhand left, and you're like, whoa, he just hit me with like a Mike Tyson level fucking left hook. And I was just worried about a single leg, right?
Yeah.
It's a very, very different game. So I think what we're going to see is guys who come from high level wrestling, guys who come from high level jiu-jitsu and high level striking. You're not going to see them just stick to their one style anymore because it really is a limiting factor. If I know that all you have is Muay Thai, then I'm just not going to play Muay Thai with you. We're not just playing Muay Thai, right?
What happened to Tai Tuivasa recently? He so depended on his knockout punch that his opponent was a brown belt or black belt, I guess. And he just took him down to the ground, pounded him for a bit, choked him out cold.
You know, you also have to take into account this. Jiu-jitsu rankings are stupid. They're really dumb. Okay. It depends on how old the person is. You know, if you tell me you're a blue belt, I go, okay, cool. How old are you? I go, I'm 47. Cool. You're a 47-year-old blue belt.
Void belt.
I'm 15. You're a 15-year-old blue belt. That 15-year-old blue belt is probably better than your black belt instructor at your school. Like he probably, you know, he'll come up with excuses and be like, oh, I was just showing him how to do the move. No, that blue belt whooped your ass, dude. Like the levels are insane. And now, because the sport is maturing and there's a little bit of money in the sport, we're starting to see that, you know, these kids are growing up and they're amazing, dude. when I watch some of the kids, and I don't even have many kids who are super, super dedicated, like some Rutolo brothers, like homeschooled, and all they do is jujitsu all day and they train 4 sessions a day. I don't have kids like that at my gym yet, but I will say that just the kids who like they're doing it recreationally and they're coming up with me for years and years and years, and they take 6 months off to play baseball or whatever like that. The level of stuff that they end up doing is better than when I was a brown belt for damn sure. Like, and they're 12. Like, so what I'm doing with my kids program is I teach them wrestling, a lot of wrestling. We do tons of wrestling, and we do mostly nogi when it comes to the competition training. And I'm trying to get them to be little experts in all these little subsystems and everything. And then, in order to keep them interested, I push them towards wrestling in high school so that they have a social group and friends when they're in high school, but also it keeps them grappling. It gets them competition experience, keeps them in shape, teaches them work ethic. And now those kids turn 18 and they're probably skill wise better than most of the grapplers were in the UFC 10 years ago. So we're just going to see a whole different level of change with this whole thing, right? I think that when you have two people who are pretty close in skill, it comes down to who dominates in jiu-jitsu. It comes down to who dominates the grip fighting. If you dominate the grip fighting, then you can dominate the setups, and then you can dominate all of the transitions and the finishes, right? In MMA, you're not gripping so much. You start from a distance, it's all striking. So it really comes down to who dominates with their footwork, on their feet, controlling distance, and then shoot boxing. If it is a grappling exchange, it's about that shoot boxing. So
you're going to be taking your workshop at Warriors Cove and Combat Lab in Delhi and Gurgaon. So Warriors Cove and Combat Lab have recently established their dominance in the Indian MMA field, like pretty much 100% win rate, absolutely dominating the Indian MMA scene with a heavy grappling base and amazing striking now adding to the repertoire. So when you do a workshop at Warriors Cove and Combat Lab, what is going to be your agenda? What are you going to focus on teaching there in your upcoming workshop?
Ooh. See, it's interesting to me because, obviously Ashwin and Mohit, who run the Warriors Cove and who run the Combat Laboratory, I know how they study. They're my students, but realistically, it's like I'm the one who belts them, and that's that sort of stuff. And they ask me questions, and I help them with stuff. But like, I'm more of a coach in some ways, and I know that they think at a very high level, and they're always studying new stuff. So when I go out there to teach seminars, I don't know, man. I'm actually this time I'm having trouble figuring out exactly what I want to show. I have a lot of stuff, but I mean, there's always a little mystery in my head of like, am I just showing them stuff that Ashwin showed them 2 weeks ago? So I so I have a few unique strains of things that I'm trying to put out there. So I have some leg lock transitions and some front headlock stuff and some wrestling techniques and things like that I'm working on. Plus, I have the added benefit of I've had a lot of getting to train with some really high level guys recently. So in the last 6 months, I've had seminars here at my academy and had the chance to ask questions with people like Jacob the Hillbilly Hammer, Jacob Couch, Bill the Grill Cooper, and I think I'm just going to show some of the stuff that I learned from those guys because I think it's a little bit more esoteric and things that they may not have seen before. And my number one thing is that I love Q&A with these guys because you can have like a whole plan of stuff. And I like seminars where people plan stuff out, but it's also like
interactive.
You've been doing this so long, you've been teaching so long. It's like there's a whole bunch of wisdom and a whole bunch of things that you have in the back of your head that you can show people that if they have questions, you might just have an answer that they have never heard before. So if you are coming to the seminars, I think it's the 5th and 6th. So I'm still getting ready for it. We're leaving next week. So 5th and 6th, and I think I'm at Combat Laboratory, and then the 7th and 8th, I'm at Warriors Cove. Guys, whatever your favorite moves are, favorite transitions. If I don't know, I'll just say, hey, man, I don't have anything better for you, but come up with questions if you guys are coming because I got a lot of stuff to show you guys on that.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I'll definitely try to make it for your seminars. I probably am shooting on that day, but if I'm not shooting, I'll definitely fly all the way to Delhi to be at a seminar again. I was there last year, and it's always good to learn from you. The stuff that I learned from you last year, I'm still using it. The ghost
Good.
escape to the Dars well, almost works every time.
I didn't show you that north-south choke from ADCC though. That was you.
Yeah, yeah, that was me. Everybody telling me that doesn't work, and I stuck to it. So yeah,
Oh, it works. It works.
yeah, yeah. People kept saying it's not going to work. Leave it. I'm like, no, I'm getting that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, hey
people
man,
stuck to it.
congratulations on the UFC stuff. And
But
I can't understand a word you're saying when I see it on Instagram, but it looks cool.
yeah. So technically, English is my sort of primary language, but I speak six
Oh yeah.
languages, and
Oh,
they needed a Hindi commentator. So I'm like, yeah, let's do it in Hindi because I grew up in Mumbai, grew up in a hostel, so my slang Hindi is pretty good. So might
six
as well use
languages. No, I wouldn't have come on your podcast if I knew you're gonna just be sitting here bragging the whole time, dude.
it. Yeah, my mom's like half Gujarati, half Israeli. Dad's Maharashtrian, raised in Kanpur, so Hindi. And then I grew up in a hostel, so a bunch of other languages. Then I studied French because I'm dyslexic and I couldn't pick up a new script. And then lived in New York, so picked up a little bit of Spanish.
Nice, dude.
So got a mix. So using some of it everywhere I can. And yeah, it's been a good, fun opportunity to be commentating for the UFC, allowing me to blend my passions with what I do for work. So good stuff. Gets me talking to more people like you and discuss the things we love. So thank you once again, Mike, and hope to see you in person next week, right?
Yeah, I'll see you
Next
next
week,
week.
6th, 7th, 8th, 9th in Delhi and Gurgaon.
Absolutely. You guys can follow me on Instagram, Cave Mike BJJ,
Right? Guys, go
Cave
follow
Academy if
him
you
on
guys are ever
Instagram,
in,
Cave Mike BJJ. And also, Mike has one of the best tutorials for free on YouTube. It's called Triangle City, I believe, right?
oh, it's called the Triangle Territory. I put it up
Triangle
for free
Territory.
on my YouTube channel. I have a lot of content up there now. It's called Reframe My Game on YouTube. So yeah, check it out, man. Subscribe. I haven't put enough work into it. I've put up a bunch of videos, but now I've been distracted with stuff. So like I'm gonna start posting some more technique videos and stuff like that up there. So if you guys are interested, again, Cave Mike BJJ on Instagram or check out Reframe My Game on YouTube.